Welcome to 10 Minutes a Day, a daily reading of the Catholic Church's social encyclicals. Today we continue with Mater et Magistra, written by Pope John XXIII in 1961.
Section 4. The rebuilding of a social order. After all this scientific and technical progress, and even because of it, the problem remains: how to build up a new order of society based on a more balanced human relationship between political communities on a national and international level. The attempt to find a solution to this problem has given birth to a number of theories. Some of these were little more than ephemeral. Others have undergone and are still undergoing substantial change. Others, again, are proving themselves less and less attractive to modern man. Why is this? It is because these ideologies do not take account of the whole man, nor even of his most important part. In particular, they take little account of certain inevitable human weaknesses, such as sickness and suffering, weaknesses which even the most advanced economic and social systems cannot completely eliminate. Finally, they fail to take account of that deep-rooted sense of religion which exists in men everywhere, and which nothing, neither violence nor cunning, can eradicate. The most fundamental modern error is that of imagining that a man's natural sense of religion is nothing more than the outcome of feeling or fantasy, to be eradicated from his soul as an anachronism and an obstacle to human progress. And yet this very need for religion reveals a man for what he is, a being created by God and tending away always towards God. As we read in St. Augustine, "Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our hearts can find no rest until they rest in you." Let men make all the technical and economic progress they can. There will be no peace nor justice in the world until they return to a sense of their dignity as creatures and sons of God, who is the first and final cause of all created being. Separated from God, a man is but a monster, in himself and towards others. The right ordering of human society presupposes the right ordering of man's conscience with God, who is himself the source of all justice, truth, and love. Here is a spectacle for all the world to see: thousands of our sons and brothers, whom we love so dearly, suffering years of bitter persecution in many lands, even those of an ancient Christian culture. And will not men who see clearly and compare the superior dignity of the persecuted with that refined barbarity of their oppressors soon return to their senses, if indeed they have not already done so? The most perniciously typical aspect of the modern error consists in the absurd attempt to reconstruct a solid and fruitful temporal order divorced from God, who is, in fact, the only foundation on which it can endure. In seeking to enhance man's greatness, men fondly imagine that they can do so by drying up the source from which that greatness springs, and from which it is nourished. They want, that is, to restrain, and, if possible, to eliminate the soul's upward surge toward God. But today's experience of so much disillusionment and bloodshed only goes to confirm those words of Scripture: "Unless the Lord build the house, they labor in vain who build it." The permanent validity of the Catholic Church's social teaching admits of no doubt. This teaching rests on one basic principle: individual human beings are the foundation, the cause, and the end of every social institution. That is necessarily so, for men are by nature social beings. This fact must be recognized, and also the fact that they are raised in the plan of providence to an order of reality which is above nature. On this basic principle, which guarantees the sacred dignity of the individual, the Church constructs her social teaching. She has formulated, particularly over the past 100 years, and through the efforts of a very well-informed body of priests and laymen, a social doctrine which points out with clarity the sure way to social reconstruction. The principles she gives are of universal application, for they take human nature into account, and the varying conditions in which man's life is lived. They also take into account the principal characteristics of contemporary society, and are thus acceptable to all. But today, more than ever, it is essential that this doctrine be known, assimilated, and put into effect in the form and manner that the different situations allow and demand. It is a difficult task indeed, yet a most noble one. To the performance of it we call not only our own sons and brothers scattered throughout the world, but also men of goodwill everywhere. First, we must reaffirm most strongly that this Catholic social doctrine is an integral part of the Christian conception of life. It is therefore our most urgent desire that this doctrine be studied more and more. First of all, it should be taught as part of the daily curriculum in Catholic schools of every kind, particularly seminaries, although we are not unaware that in some of these latter institutions this has been done for a long time now, and in an outstanding way. We would also like to see it added to the religious instruction program of parishes and of associations of the lay apostolate. It must be spread by every modern means at our disposal: daily newspapers, periodicals, popular and scientific publications, radio and television. Our beloved sons, the laity, can do much to help this diffusion of Catholic social doctrine by studying it themselves and putting it into practice, and by zealously striving to make others understand it. They should be convinced that this is the best way of demonstrating the truth and efficacy of this teaching, is to show that it can provide the solution to present-day difficulties. They will thus win those people who are opposed to it through ignorance of it. Who knows, but a ray of its light may one day enter their minds. It is not enough merely to formulate a social doctrine. It must be translated into reality. It is particularly true of the Church's social doctrine, the light of which is truth, justice its objective, and love its driving force. It is vitally important, therefore, that our sons learn to understand this doctrine. They must be educated to it. No Christian education be considered complete unless it covers every kind of obligation. It must therefore aim at implanting and fostering among the faithful an awareness of their duty to carry on their economic and social activities in a Christian manner. The transition from theory to practice is of its very nature difficult, and is especially so when one tries to reduce to concrete terms a social doctrine such as that of the Church. There are several reasons why this is so. Among them, we can mention man's deep-rooted selfishness, the materialism in which modern society is steeped, and the difficulty of determining sometimes what precisely the demands of justice are in a given instance. Consequently, a pure theoretical instruction in man's social and economic obligations is inadequate. People must also be shown ways in which they can properly fulfill these obligations. In our view, therefore, formal instruction, to be successful, must be supplemented by the students' active cooperation in their own training. They must gain an experimental knowledge of the subject, and that by their own positive action. It is a practice which makes perfect, even in such matters as the right use of liberty. Thus one learns Christian behavior in social and economic matters by actual Christian action in these fields. The lay apostolate, therefore, has an important role to play in social education, especially those associations and organizations which have as their specific objective the Christianization of contemporary society. The members of these associations, besides profiting personally from their own day-to-day experience in this field, can also help in the social education of the rising generation by giving it the benefit of the experience they have gained. But we must remind you here of an important truth. The Christian conception of life demands of all, whether high-born or lowly, the spirit of moderation and sacrifice. That is what God calls us to by His grace. There is, alas, a spirit of hedonism abroad today, which beguiles men into thinking that life is nothing more than the quest for pleasure and the satisfaction of human passions. This attitude is disastrous. Its evil effect on souls and body are undeniable. Even on the natural level, temperance and simplicity of life are the dictates of sound policy. On the supernatural level, the Gospels and the whole ascetic tradition of the Church require a sense of mortification and penance which assures the rule of the Spirit over the flesh, and offers an efficacious means of expiating the punishment due to sin, from which no one except Jesus Christ and His Immaculate Mother is exempt. There are three stages which should normally be followed in the reduction of social principles into practice. First, one reviews the concrete situation. Secondly, one forms judgment on it in the light of these same principles. Thirdly, one decides what in the circumstances can and should be done to implement these principles. These are the three stages that are usually expressed in the three terms: look, judge, act. It is important for our young people to grasp this method and to practice it. Knowledge acquired in this way does not remain merely abstract, but is seen as something that can be translated and must be translated into action.